This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today I'm honored to have Mona Alcom from Falkon AI. So we're going to talk a lot about like what the trends are today with AI. We're going to talk a little bit about her background, her history, a little bit about leadership like we always do, and hopefully learn a little bit about what we can do with our data, because we all know that we store a lot of data and sometimes we don't use it properly. So we need to figure that out too. Anyway, with all that being said, Mona, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, John.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today and what your journey's been like.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with I did my undergrad in computer science 5,000 years ago. Got my... I look good for, being 5,025 years old. I got hired right out of undergrad by Microsoft. That was back in 2000. So started my career as an engineer working in a huge company and feeling very lost. Then moved into product management because I like people more than code, and I like solving problems at a higher level of abstraction. And then decided, 12 years in that I'm not really built for big companies. Soft skills are not really my superpower, I guess. And so I decided to go on an adventure, and I think of it as CEO school. I knew I wanted to build a company, but I wasn't sure what that really meant. So I worked for 3 very different CEOs and helped them build 3 very different companies, starting from Code.org, which was all about teaching kids computer science. Education's a topic I'm very passionate about. Then went and ran the store team at Zulily, which was a retail company that sold tutus to young mothers and for their kids, not for them, of course. That would be weird. And then, joined Amperity super early, pre-product, pre-customers, pre-revenue. It was a big customer data platform. In those 3 experiences, learned a lot about company building, about leadership, as important to figure out what works as it is to figure out what doesn't work, and then ventured out and started Falkon, and here we are.
Awesome. And, for anybody that's not familiar with Falkon, what is it that you guys do exactly?
Yeah, so Falkon is essentially intelligent revenue automation. We focus predominantly on B2B SaaS companies, so companies that make software for other companies. And my realization was there's a lot of data in the go-to-market space that's being collected, but none of it's actually being used other than reporting to the board. And to me, reporting on the business is the least interesting use case for data. And so we wanted to actually use all that data to do automation so that you can have a team that is 25% the team that you have right now, and they can produce 3x, 5x more output and more revenue for a company. And so that's essentially what we do.
Awesome. And when you're talking about like improving automation, one of the buzzwords that always comes in is machine learning and AI and things like that. How are you guys utilizing that?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I don't actually think automation is necessarily tied with machine learning. I think it is tied very much with being able to use data, being able to operationalize data. So an example of automation that we do is most companies, when they're looking for their prospective customers, they have a bunch of people, sales reps, sales development reps that are searching for the right companies and the right people to contact in those companies. Why the fuck are they doing that? Right? Because all that data exists. Why are they the monkeys that are like typing in the criteria? So we just automate all of it. And we reach out to those people. And then only when those people respond do we approach the sales rep, because that's where humans are good. They're great at conversation, they're great at follow ups, and so on. So the humans end up doing what they're good at, and machines end up doing the repetitive tasks that are really not ideal for humans anyway. Now, obviously, one caveat I will add there is that with tools like ChatGPT, and we've all been, thinking about that and what it means,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain things that have been historically considered very, very human that I think will get automated, but I don't think it's going to happen as soon as we think.
Yeah. Like I played around with ChatGPT a lot, probably more than I should, just to confess a little bit there. It's written, a lot of business emails that I probably should have been writing myself. And I found a lot of things that aren't quite right with it. It's more like I heard someone call it bullshit as a service. Yeah, it's really good at convincing you that this is the accurate thing in well written verbs and whatever verbal. I don't know
Yes.
what it is, but it doesn't seem to hit all the pieces. It misses things. It says things incorrectly. Like I've asked it stuff about this show, and it gave me a pretty good description of the show. But then I kind of look at it like, well, actually, we don't really talk about the latest in tech news. So, but it confidently tells me that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, right, cognition. I think AI, the intelligence part, is the part that I question the most from a branding standpoint, because intelligence is predicated on cognition, right? If you've seen 1,000 pictures of a fried egg, and you can now, when someone says egg, create a picture that looks like the 1,000 pictures that you've seen, that's great for visuals, right? But you don't know what a fried egg is. You still don't know what a fried egg is. Is it something you eat? Is it something you type on? What is it? And what is its value to humans? That's the part that I think is quintessential human. So I'm not super worried about automation in that way.
Yeah, I get that too. And I've played around with what's it called, Stable Diffusion, where it makes the images and stuff. And I can never get it to make an image with the right number of fingers. Like if it makes a person, they're gonna have like 7 fingers or 3 fingers. I'm like, something's not right there. There's an extra arm in that picture. I can't quite figure out. I told it to make a basketball player for my college. I just wanted a generic basketball player for the college that I went to. It had the right color jersey. It had a person with a basketball, but it had 3 numbers on the jersey instead of 2. And usually there's 1 or 2. There's never 3 in basketball, and it's like something's just not right. The socks weren't the same height. They were different kind of socks that the person was wearing. It's like it's not quite there, but it's interesting. It's fun to play with.
It is fun to play with. And I think there will be some pretty interesting applications. Like, for instance, I do think it's going to revolutionize how we search the internet, for instance, right? And I'm, as a former Microsoft person, really excited that finally Microsoft's going to leapfrog with technology search. And Google is a little bit behind on that. So personally, that's pretty exciting for me. But I don't think it's about to write your business emails and your podcast overviews without supervision anytime soon.
Correct. Yeah, you definitely need to improve your proofreading and fact checking skills for sure. But it's good about getting you an outline for something. Like if you want to write a new policy for a new password policy, it'll give you a great outline. Now go back and edit it because it's dated. It's got some things in there that you don't want in your company. But
exactly right.
So let's talk a little bit about data and data in general. So I've had guests on the show that tell me data is toxic. You need to not store very much data. You need to get away from data because from a privacy standpoint and a security standpoint with GDPR and California privacy, there's all these risks and stuff. And then I've had other people that say data is the most valuable thing that you have. And but And I like to be in the middle somewhere. I think data is extremely valuable and you need to have it, but you also need to protect it in a way. And a lot of times when we protect our data, we're not using it, because think about the things that you protect at your house. Like I protect my passport. I put it in a safe and I lock it up and it stays locked away and it's hard to get to. How can we use tools to use that data in a way and still make sure it's protected?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, first of all, just generally, I'm always amused by people that take hard positions on any spectrum.
Mm.
As an example, if you ate 4 tablespoons of salt that's in your kitchen right now, you will die. If you don't eat any salt at all, you will also die. There's an appropriate amount of poison that you must ingest, which is salt, to survive. So it is not poison, it's elixir. And at some point it turns into poison, right? So I think taking extreme positions to me is a sign of poor intellect or just not deep enough thinking.
Right.
Having said that, I think with data specifically, at the end of the day, data by itself is not going to do anything.
Mm.
And I do believe very strongly that before you collect data, you need to understand the ways in which you are going to use it. And if you are unable to provide justification for collecting data based on how you plan to use it, you should not collect it. That is my position. That results in avoiding the laziness that we have, right? Because within engineering teams, like, great, Amplitude is so easy, Mixpanel so easy, Pendo so easy. I'm going to capture every fucking event on my web app possible. And oh, by the way, in doing so, it's not only that I've collected a lot of data, it's that I've collected so much data that the data that was useful actually gets buried. So figuring out where the useful data is becomes 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times harder. So to me, the more data you collect, the harder it becomes to use it. So start with, how am I going to use the data? Let that inform how you are going to collect data. So don't make the mistake of, we're going to collect it now and figure out 2 years down the line how we're going to use it, because it's going to be a disaster. You'll have all kinds of bullshit events. Then there will be a big data cleaning project. And then now we need to hire 7 more data engineers and get 7 more tools. And then a year later, as a business user, I still have one fucking Tableau dashboard, right? So how am I better off? I'm not. So step one, I would say, is only collect data that you're going to use. Start with the use case first and then collect the data. Step number 2 is try to avoid. For at least analytical use cases, I have rarely seen scenarios where PII information is important, right? Understanding the behaviors of customers in aggregate is a very different problem to solve from understanding the behavior of one particular customer. And even for that one particular customer, can you get away with an ID, right? So that's very, very important. The bar for PII should be very high. And even if you are collecting PII, not all data is the same. So I would strongly recommend pushing the PII part of the data in a data store that is a vault. It is protected. Yes, there's a join key with an ID that's going to connect to all the behavioral information, but that data doesn't need to be guarded like your life depends on it. People's names, email addresses, and so on absolutely do, in my opinion. So I don't take a fast and loose perspective on data privacy. But again, this is the spectrum thing, right? All data doesn't need to be protected the same way because all data isn't the same.
Right.
We want to be able to parse our PII information, even within that, be able to parse highly sensitive PII versus sensitive PII. Those should be in vaults that are appropriate to the level of privacy that's required. And then everything else, like event streams and so on and so forth, should be very loose restrictions so that people can leverage that data.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think that it comes down to, like you were kind of alluding to it, like an immaturity when it comes to understanding your information. And, a lot of times our developers are kind of, unfortunately, separated from, the business side in a sense, because they have, a product manager, then you have to go to a project manager, scrum master, and, requirements kind of trickle down sometimes. Sometimes the user stories aren't written very well, or sometimes they are, but they still don't understand the full scope of the application and the use. They know the part that they're building and they understand this user story, and that's about it. And they just said, okay, well, to hell with it. We'll just put all the data in this one bucket and be done with it. And I meet the requirements and I'm moving on.
Yep.
Don't really understand the value of each element.
That's right. And, this is a little bit to me like you wouldn't write random code and add a bunch of buttons to a web app unless you had requirements, right? And you understood what they were about. Just like you have product requirements and PRDs for features, you should have PRDs for data, and they should be driven by, at the end of this, I want these 3 dashboards, or I want this automated workflow, and therefore working back from what I want as the end state, this is the data that we need to collect, so that your engineers don't have to become product managers in order to have the context to make good decisions about what data they should be capturing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how is it that you guys go about finding things that can be automated in a way that bring value? Because I know for me, it's like a lot of analysis has to be done manually to figure out this thing should be automated, because people get in this rhythms and these habits of, I'll just click here and then I'll do here and I'll do this. And I like the stability of doing the same thing every day sometimes. And so how is it you guys go about finding the things to be automated?
Yeah. So I would say we think of several criteria on how we prioritize what should get automated and what shouldn't. Mm-hmm. One, if a human being has an positive emotional connection with a task, even if it can be automated, it should not be automated, because that person is going to spend a lot of energy trying to shut you down and because they're feeling irrelevant. My approach to this is, why fight the hard fight if you can just go win? There's so much territory to be won where no one is going to be in your way, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I get a little bit triggered by the chat GPTs of the world, because it scares people because they feel irrelevant, right? So fuck that. Like, let's not think about that. Let's think about the stuff that if you went in and said, hey, here's a super boring part of your job, and it's highly repetitive and you have to do it a lot. So a small task that you have to do once a quarter, that you don't like doing, is not a great idea worth automating, because, okay, it's 5 minutes in a quarter. Who cares? No big deal, right? If it's something you have to do 30 times in a day and you hate doing it and I can automate it, that's exciting, because now you and our interests are aligned. That's one. Second is, what is the impact to the business of automating a task? So if a task is repetitive and likely to be wrong and erroneous, and the cost of those errors is high for a business, that also means it's a task that is ripe for automation. And then third is, the task has to be something where data exists that either the task doesn't have a high cognition, right? Which means it's automation ready, or if it is high cognition, there's a lot of digital data available such that you can train machine learning models to do that automation for you. So one of those two conditions has to be true in order for a task to even be eligible for automation. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a small example. In our world, when a sales development rep creates a meeting with a prospect, right? Sets up a meeting. Good hygiene that ensures that those people actually show up to those meetings is to send them a reminder 3 days before the meeting and to send them a reminder the day before the meeting. I don't know any sales rep who's like, I love doing that. I love going and looking at my calendar and figuring out which email reminders I need to send, right? Cognition, low. Repetitiveness, high. Number of times it's done in a week, over 50 for a given sales rep. And they're emotionally negatively invested in this idea. They don't believe their essence is captured in their ability to send a fucking reminder. Very good task for automation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I was just thinking about, so I work in the media industry, and, movies and audio and things like that are really important when it comes to editing and cleaning up and fixing things like that. And there's been a lot of, innovation in the last couple of years. There were two things that really stood out to me. And a couple of years ago at this big conference that happens called NAB, National Association of Broadcasters. I forgot who the company was now. Maybe it was Adobe. They demoed this product where you could run an entire movie, like a 3-hour movie, through this thing, and it would cut out and make a 2-minute like trailer. And it was really good, and it was able to do that based off of like audio cues and how many times the action was on the screen, and it made these really good trailers pretty quickly, automatically. And I remember our promotions department folks were there, and they watched it, and I was like, wouldn't that be awesome if we could do that? It would cut your work in half. They're like, no, we do not want that. Right? Partly because they love doing that part of it. They love to find the exciting things and put pieces together that flow well and are, drive emotion for the viewer.
Yep.
And so I think that's exactly what you're talking about, where you can do it, but it's not a candidate because it has that positive emotional connection.
Actually, that was, this is such a hard learned lesson for me. I'll give you a short story. So, I've observed analysts, business analysts doing analysis. Like I've sat in, I don't know, thousands of weekly business reviews, right? Where you're looking at your core KPIs. As a business leader, the first thing you want to figure out is, okay, if our performance on conversion rate went up 5% week over week, why? Right? And it's a disaster. The question why is like, that's going to be a 3-week dumpster diving into data to figure out the why. And so then actually before I started Falcon, I observed how analysts go and do root cause analysis for business KPIs. And as an idealist, most founders are, the first version of Falcon was automated root cause analysis for business analysts because we were trying to automate them. We thought they hated doing that work. And we thought it was unacceptable for a business user to wait for 3 weeks to get an answer to a why about why 3 weeks ago a number went up or down. Guess what? We built the best product ever. And when I would show it to BI leaders, the first thing they would say is, well, that automates my job. We could not line up a single customer because we were automating a BI analyst out of a job. And it took me 6 months to come to terms with the reality that people don't make rational decisions. That can be in any context, business or personal. If you are taking away their cheese, it does not matter how analytical you are, how much you can tell them what the benefits, I'm going to up-level you. No, they don't want to be up-leveled. They want to do that root cause analysis. We had to pretty much restart Falcon because of this lesson that when you try to automate jobs people like to do, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get that completely. And I think what you got to do is figure out how to like automate a portion of the job so that they can focus on the parts they do like to do and ignore the parts that they don't.
That's right. That's exactly.
Which is exactly what your example for sending the reminders and the, maybe the follow-ups too, because I hate doing follow-ups. I'm sure a lot of people do too. It's just like, oh, here, let me throw this over there so you can reject me again.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about, building Falcon and what that process was like and what your leadership style was like.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of debates internally about leadership because I tend to take I'm going to say some contrarian things and probably get into trouble. But here we go. To me, in essence, what is leadership? It is the ability to make a bunch of people voluntarily give up their independent thought to follow you. That's all leadership is, right? We've imposed a lot of morality into leadership and have almost ostracized forms of leadership that are actually pretty powerful because they're not morally right. But if you're a student of leadership, I believe it is important to study all tactics that drive that behavior, which is a group of people voluntarily decide to give up their independent thinking to follow you. That's leadership, right? Cult leaders are amazing leaders.
They are.
They can make people kill themselves, right? Certainly not suggesting that, we should be aspiring to that. However, some of the techniques that they use are very, very important for any leader, right? So my leadership style tends to be one of authenticity. I think in a world where people are trying to please more than ever before, because we've all become a lot more fragile, people are drawn to outliers who are authentic. I am who I am. What is in my brain is on my tongue. So there's no guesswork, and there's a certain level of connection that happens there. Because in my experience, people's desire to follow people that are authentic is extremely high. So that's one. Second, creative vision that borders a little bit on madness, right? There are some leaders that become leaders because they bring a sense of peace and comfort and process and structure to an organization. You just feel calm around them. You will never feel calm around me, but you will always feel energized. It'll either be a fucking amazing day or it's going to be a terrible day. It's not going to be an okay, unmemorable day. That's a type of leadership that attracts to it a specific type of followership, which is people that like to go on joyrides, people that have adventure in their hearts, right? So that's actually one of the reasons why I left Microsoft, because that is not the typical Microsoft employee persona, right? They are looking for calmness and peace and predictability and being able to see 12 months out versus I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So that ends up being a second type of leadership. And then the third is, I hate the word servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it is a big and shit leadership, which is, I don't lead from the front. I don't lead from the behind. I am right in there, right? Like, I do more individual contributor work than most people I know that are running companies. Because to me, if you are not in the trenches with your team, if you're not a soldier, if you're a general and you're sitting in the campsite off the battleground and providing orders, that's one way of leading. That's not my way of leading. So I am very much on the front lines, fighting the fight every single day. I also think it ties back to authenticity, right? Because how can I tell you to do a better job at your sales pitch if I've never sold in my life? And if I am in prospect calls every single day, getting doors slammed in my face as well. So those would be, I guess, maybe my traits for leadership.
No, I think that's really good. I like the getting in the trench thing, because I think once you get to a certain level in tech, sometimes you start to lose your I don't know, your ability to understand everything that's going on and communicate. I always have this thing. So once I got into management, where I had to kind of step away from coding every day or whatever, I got into what I call my fun day Fridays. So on Fridays, I try to not do any meetings, and I'm going to pick a project and I'm going to work on that project. Whether it's, grabbing a user story and starting to write some code, or I'm going to go with our server team and rack a new server and plug it up and connect the switches up. I'm going to do something that's getting my hands dirty. Maybe I'm out deploying laptops with the help desk team. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something fun day Friday, and it's going to be not sitting in my office, not on a conference call, not in Zoom, doing something.
Yes, 100%. That actually also brings up another thing, which is we don't have managers at Falkon. I don't believe in managers. I think people are grown-ups. No one needs to be managed. People
Love it.
They need coaching. They need support. They need someone to tell them to hurry the fuck up sometimes. But nobody needs a manager. We are adults. So we don't have managers. Every person at Falcon has an individual contributor payload. And, this is something that I remember when I was at Zulily, getting into a debate with our head of HR there, because my criteria for any engineering leader roles is they have to be a phenomenal engineer. And it's not a popular opinion because, in my experience, a lot of people that move towards management are either motivated by a title or they're motivated by not wanting to write code, right? And so if you don't want to write code, why the fuck are you in an engineering team? I didn't want to write code, but then I became a product manager. I didn't become an engineering manager, right? You have to love your craft in order to be a leader in that space. And so taking the approach of, yes, if you are a manager, be a leader, because people don't need to be managed. And if you have a team that needs that much management, you need to rethink your hiring philosophy.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think there's some companies where people just they want to get by, and they're just working till retirement and just kind of skating around. And those are not the people you want on your team. Those are the ones that need management.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
So when it comes into everybody being individual contributors, do you guys do anything like annual performance reviews, or is there anything like that, or is it just we see you every day, we're talking every day, we know where your shortcomings are because we're having those conversations?
100%. So having done performance reviews for 20 years and realizing how nonsensical they are, to me, performance reviews are like the prison system. They don't rehabilitate people. They just make them feel shitty with unactionable feedback that is provided 9 months after it was relevant. And it is always in the context of judgment. How many people do you know that are like, yes, please judge me, and from this experience, what I will take is an opportunity to grow and learn? That's just so counter to human psychology, right? So we do a few different things that work pretty well. One, our projects end up being highly collaborative. So at any given time, you're not working in a silo, you're working with other people, and they are assessing your performance as your coworkers, and you are assessing their performance. Two, we actually train people on how to give and receive feedback. Feedback is not, it's a skill. You have to learn it. And unfortunately, we don't teach it in schools, right? If anything, the feedback that the methodology of feedback that we're taught in schools and home is hold on to it, weaponize it until you get so pissed off that you blow up, right? That's not feedback. So learning how we've trained our team to learn how to give feedback and how to receive feedback. For instance, the only acceptable answer to a piece of feedback is thank you, even if you don't agree with it. That's your shit to deal with, right? Accept the feedback, then process it offline, keep what makes sense, throw out what doesn't. You don't have to get into a back and forth argument with someone who's giving you feedback. The third thing that we do is we have a challenger program that I simply love. So every quarter, we do a random number generator, and we take two people and make them each other's challenger buddies. And they're across disciplines. So often it's like an engineer is paired up with a sales rep. And your challenger and you are supposed to meet once a week. At the start of the quarter, you tell them one thing that you are trying to work on. And they tell you one thing that they are trying to work on. And then you hold each other accountable. So it's more like a fitness coach and less like performance review. And it's never anyone that is in a leadership position. So there's no connection between your weekly challenger and your performance or your compensation or how you are perceived by the team.
I love that. I know I've been in, it reminds me of the first kind of mentor that I had. I worked at a company, as a larger company, and I became a manager, and they made us go through leadership training. And leadership training was really just sitting in there and having different people, tell stories about their first time being a manager. And it really wasn't helpful until at the very end, everybody asked, if you're interested in a mentor, email me and let me know, and I'll gladly be your mentor. So I emailed every single one of the people. They're all like EVPs, at the company, and SVPs. And none of them accepted me as a mentee except for one, and he was in sales. And I was in tech, and he was in sales, and we had nothing in common whatsoever. But I learned more from him about just general feedback, and he wasn't afraid to tell me anything. Like, I had two people quit on the same day, and he's like, "Why are they quitting?" I was like, "Oh, because the banks are paying a lot more." And he's like, "That's not it." I was like, "Well, that's what they told me." He's like, "Well, because they didn't want to hurt your feelings, but you're a bad boss. That's why they quit." Like, I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you're not a good manager. You're micromanaging them. You're not trusting them. You're not being transparent about everything. You're only telling them the things that you think they need to know. It's like, you're not a good boss." And he just kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, holy crap. But having someone that's not involved in your, not in your department, that you can kind of work through things with, I think is really important and helpful. And going back to the performance reviews, so I've been in two different places where we had two different styles. One, we had performance reviews where it impacted your raises, your annual, increases. And it was in a way that, like, let's say I had 6 people on my team, and we had a 1 through 5 scale. If I gave one person a 4, I had to give a different person a 2. They all had to balance out to an average of a 3. It was terrible. Basically, I just gave everybody 3s all year round, and the performance reviews were a waste of everything. And then I worked at a place where performance reviews tied to absolutely nothing. And, that seemed really cool. And the first year, you're able to get good feedback. And then you realize that no one's reading this and no one's paying any attention to it. So it got to the point where people were just copying and pasting their previous year's performance review into their new year's performance. It was just what are we doing here? Why are we even doing this?
That's crazy. That is crazy.
But I guess that's the way business works sometimes.
That's the problem with conventional wisdom, right? And lack of independent thinking, because any intelligent human being should be able to figure out in about 2 years of being in an annual performance review cycle what a complete waste of time it is. Yet we all do it. And I remember at Microsoft for the first 5 years, I never filled out my performance review thing. And I could get away with it because I was good at my job. Then they came down super hard. HR was like, the form cannot be empty. And literally you would get like hate mails every day, you and your manager. And then the closer it got to performance review closing time, they would CC more and more people. I was like the SDE 2, like super junior. My vice president would get CC'd on these nagging emails that she is not filling out her performance review. And so I had a whole discussion with them saying, this is bullshit. This means nothing. Like, make it better and I will participate. Mm-hmm. At the end, my manager said, open up the fucking thing. I'll write it for you. And so then he started writing my performance review from my perspective as well, which I was very
At that previous company, they sort of like put in character limits. You had to have so many characters in every one of the fields. And then after people complained about it, they were using PeopleSoft, which, I don't know if you've used PeopleSoft. Yes. They enabled the auto performance writer where you could just click, like, and sentences would just pop up that, like,
amazing.
Like, what's the purpose? Like, what's the point? I'm just going to click this sentence and this sentence and this sentence. Yeah, sure, they do good. Yeah, whatever.
Hey, maybe we can use ChatGPT for this.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, I have used it to write a job recommendation before. Someone sent me one of those LinkedIn things. Will you recommend me? Let's go to ChatGPT and see what they say. Sure, there you go.
I love it.
Well, this has been great. So, Mona, how can people connect with you online and learn more about Falkon and the things that you guys are doing and the way that you're helping companies automate workflows and tasks?
Yes. So just reach out to me at mona@falkon.ai. It's Falcon with a K. We could not afford the C. Or just hit me up on LinkedIn. There are very few Mona Akmals out there.
All right. And I'll tag all that up in geekleader.com and link that together. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed it.
Likewise, John. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.